This is insane. My husband found out about my one-night stand on a ladies' night, and now... Hey, Reddit. It feels strange to be sharing my story here, but I guess everyone needs an outlet. My name is Morgan, and up until recently, I thought I had it all figured out. I was happily married to William for 3 years, and we were living the dream we had built since high school. If someone had told me a few months ago that this would be my life now, I'd have honestly thought that person was lying or joking, LOL. But now my nightmare has become my reality. William and I were high school sweethearts. We met in our junior year, a time when everything seemed possible and love felt like the answer to every question. He was the shy, smart guy in class, and I was the outgoing social butterfly. Somehow we clicked, and before we knew it, we were inseparable. I still remember our first date like it was yesterday. It was a warm spring afternoon, and William had mustered up the courage to ask me out. He was so nervous, stumbling over his words as he invited me to a local diner for milkshakes. I said yes without hesitation, my heart fluttering with excitement. That first date was magical. We sat in a cozy corner booth, sipping on our milkshakes and talking for hours. William was a great listener, and he made me laugh like no one else could. We talked about everything and nothing, sharing our hopes, our dreams, and our fears. As the sun began to set, we reluctantly left the diner, neither of us wanting the night to end. We walked hand in hand through the park, the world around us fading into the background as we lost ourselves in each other's company. It was then, under the starlit sky, that I knew I had found someone special. William and I were eager to spend more time together. We had quickly become each other's best friend and confidant, and our second date was just as memorable as the first. A few days after our first date, William surprised me by showing up at my doorstep with a picnic basket in hand. He had planned a romantic picnic in the park, complete with sandwiches, fruit, and my favorite chocolate chip cookies. It was such a thoughtful gesture, and I couldn't help but smile as we walked to the park hand in hand. We found a secluded spot under a large oak tree and spread out a blanket. The weather was perfect, with the sun shining brightly overhead and a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. We talked and laughed, sharing stories about our childhoods, our dreams for the future, and everything in between. As we sat there enjoying each other's company, I felt a sense of peace and contentment wash over me. It was at that moment that I knew William was someone special, someone I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. After we finished our picnic, we took a stroll through the park, exploring the winding paths and enjoying the beauty of nature. We came across a pond with a small dock, and William suggested we sit and watch the sunset. It was a perfect end to a perfect day, and as we sat there, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink, I felt grateful to have William by my side. Our second date solidified our bond, and from that day on, we were inseparable. By our third date, I was really starting to fall for William. We had been friends for a while, and I always felt a spark between us, but I never imagined it would turn into something more. As we sat in the cozy little cafe sipping our coffees, William looked at me with those kind eyes of his and asked me to be his girlfriend. I was taken aback, but in the best way possible. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, and I knew that I wanted to be with him too. I said yes, of course, and we spent the rest of the day walking around the city, hand in hand, feeling like we were on top of the world. From that moment on, everything felt different. I felt different. It was like all the pieces of my life were finally falling into place. On our fourth date, William and I decided to try something new and exciting. We both loved the outdoors, so we chose to go on a hike in a nearby national park. The weather was perfect, with the sun shining and a gentle breeze blowing through the trees. As we walked, we chatted about everything under the sun, from our favorite childhood memories to our hopes and dreams for the future. At one point, we stumbled upon a beautiful clearing with a stunning view of the valley below. We sat on a big rock, and William pulled out a simple picnic he had prepared. It was nothing fancy, just sandwiches, fruit, and a bottle of wine. We laughed and talked for hours, enjoying each other's company and the peacefulness of our surroundings. As the sun started to set, we reluctantly headed back to the car, feeling happy and content. It was a day I'll always remember, a day that made me realize how much I cared for William and how special our connection was. Being with William was so easy. He was caring, attentive, and always made me laugh. We shared so many interests and had the same values and goals in life. I felt like I could truly be myself around him, and he accepted me for who I was, flaws and all. As our relationship grew, so did my love for him. I never knew I could care for someone so deeply. Every moment with him was special, whether we were out on a fancy date or just cuddled up on the couch watching movies. He made me feel loved and cherished in a way I had never experienced before. When William proposed to me, I was over the moon. It was the happiest day of my life. I couldn't wait to spend forever with him, building a life and a family together. I knew that with him by my side, I could take on anything life threw at us. We continued to make memories together, exploring new places, trying new things, and falling more in love with each passing day. We supported each other through the ups and downs of high school, celebrating each other's successes and comforting each other in times of need. But as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. Our story took a turn that neither of us could have predicted, and now I find myself here, reminiscing about the days when life was simpler and love was all we needed. Looking back, I can't help but smile at how far we've come. From that first date to now, our love has only grown stronger. William is my rock, my best friend, and my soulmate. I'm so grateful to have him in my life, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for us. Our love story continued through college. We both attended the same university, studying hard during the week and enjoying each other's company on the weekends. We had plans, big plans. We talked about our future, about getting married, about starting a family. It all seemed so perfect, so certain. After college, we both landed jobs in our respective fields. William found success as a programmer, his skills in high demand in the tech industry. I found a job at a local company, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. We moved into a cozy little apartment, filled it with our dreams and aspirations, and settled into our new life together. Life was good. We were happy, or so I thought. Looking back now, I realize that maybe I was too caught up in my own world to see the cracks forming in our relationship. We still went on date nights, still said I love you every day, but something had changed. Maybe it was the monotony of everyday life, the routine that had crept into our marriage. Maybe it was my own insecurities, my fear of missing out on something more exciting, more passionate. As the years passed, our lives settled into a comfortable routine. We both had demanding jobs, and most of our days were spent working hard and trying to make ends meet. Our evenings were spent together, watching TV or just talking about our day. While I loved William dearly, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I began to feel restless, craving excitement and adventure. Our life together had become predictable, and I longed for something more. I wanted to feel alive again, to experience the thrill of the unknown. I tried to shake off these feelings, telling myself that I was being selfish. After all, I had a loving husband, a stable job, and a comfortable life. But the longing persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. I started to withdraw from William, losing interest in our usual activities. I would often find myself lost in thought, daydreaming about a life less ordinary. I knew I had to do something to break free from the monotony, but I wasn't sure what. As the days passed, my thoughts became consumed with fantasies of what it would be like to cheat on William. I knew it was wrong, but the idea of something spontaneous and exciting was too tempting to resist. I even toyed with the idea of suggesting an open relationship, but deep down, I knew William would never agree to such a thing. I yearned for a taste of the forbidden, something to break up the monotony of our day-to-day life. The thought of being with someone else, even just for a moment, filled me with a sense of exhilaration I hadn't felt in years. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't help myself. The thrill of the unknown called to me, whispering promises of excitement and passion. I tried to push these thoughts aside, to focus on my marriage and the life I had built with William. But the desire for something more lingered, growing stronger with each passing day. It was a challenging time in my marriage with William. There were moments when I felt tempted to cheat, moments of weakness where I sought validation or excitement outside of our relationship. I even went as far as installing a dating app and going on a few dates, but I never crossed the line into physical intimacy. Fear held me back, fear of getting caught, fear of hurting William, fear of losing everything we had built together. I remember the anxiety that consumed me, the constant worry that someone would recognize me, or that my actions would somehow find their way back to William. It was a dark period where I felt lost and unsure of myself. I sought solace in the anonymity of new clubs, where I could pretend to be single and flirt with strangers. But when things started to escalate, I always pulled back, paralyzed by fear. I realize now that these actions were a symptom of a deeper issue within myself. I was seeking something outside of our relationship to fill a void. Now I know deep down that nothing can replace what I had with William. As time went on, I found myself growing further and further apart from William. Despite his efforts to spice things up, to inject some excitement into our lives, I couldn't shake the feeling of boredom that had settled over me like a heavy fog. William tried his best. He really did. He planned spontaneous date nights, surprised me with thoughtful gifts, and even suggested we try new things in the bedroom. But no matter what he did, I still felt like something was missing. I knew he was trying to overcompensate, to make up for the fact that I was feeling restless and unsatisfied. But no matter how hard he tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that our life together had become dull and predictable. I really did feel guilty for feeling that way. William was a wonderful husband, kind, loving, and always there for me. But despite his efforts, then I couldn't help but feel like there was something missing in our relationship. As the weeks turned into months, my feelings of boredom and restlessness only grew stronger. I knew deep down that it was my fault. I should have talked to William about how I was feeling, maybe suggested we try therapy or something to spice things up. But I didn't. Instead, I let my feelings fester, allowing them to slowly poison our relationship. I became increasingly distant, lost in my own thoughts and fantasies of what life could be like if things were different. I knew I was being unfair to William. He didn't deserve to be treated this way. He was a good man, a loving husband, and he deserved better than what I was giving him. But I couldn't seem to help myself. I was trapped in a cycle of longing for something more, something exciting and new, while at the same time feeling guilty for wanting it. It was a vicious cycle that I didn't know how to break. Then one day, an opportunity presented itself that would change everything. My co-workers' best friends invited me out for a girls' night out, and I decided to go, hoping it would help lift my spirits. Little did I know that decision would lead me down a path I never could have imagined. I was always a social person, but I hadn't been particularly close to my co-workers until my two best friends, Emily and Jessica, started working at the same company. We had all been friends since college, and their presence at work added a new level of excitement to my days. Work, which had previously been just another mundane part of my routine, now became more enjoyable. As the weekend approached, Emily and Jessica suggested a girls' night out with our other close friends from college and high school. I eagerly agreed, feeling the need for a break from the monotony of my daily life. I hadn't gone out with my friends in a while, and the prospect of a fun night out lifted my spirits. I shared the plan with William, who understood my need for some time away and encouraged me to go and have a good time. When the weekend approached, I was thrilled at the prospect of a night out with my friends. It had been ages since we had done something together. I put more effort into my outfit than usual, wanting to feel special for the occasion. We started our evening with street food, enjoying each other's company and reminiscing about our high school days and about where everyone had ended up. Then we moved on to a local pub, where we indulged in drinks and laughter. As the night progressed, I noticed a man across the room who caught my eye. He was handsome, and there was something intriguing about him. We exchanged smiles, and I felt a rush of excitement. My friends encouraged me to approach him, even though I hesitated at first, knowing I was married. They dismissed my concerns, saying it was just a girls' night out, and that I deserved to have some fun. They also said that there were no rules on a girls' night out. Feeling strengthened by their support, I walked over to him. We struck up a conversation, and he introduced himself as Vincent. He was charming and easy to talk to, and soon we were laughing and enjoying each other's company. Vincent joined our group, and we continued to have a great time together. As the evening wore on and the drinks flowed, we all started getting bolder and bolder. I found myself drawn to Vincent, and we started making out, and in that moment, I felt a thrill I hadn't experienced in a long time. The idea of doing something spontaneous and exciting appealed to me, and I let myself get swept up in the moment. Vincent suggested we go back to his apartment, and without much hesitation, I agreed. My friend cheered me on and encouraged me and even said they would help cover me if needed. I should have known that was a lie. When I look back, I deeply regret the choices I made that night. Under the influence of alcohol, I let my guard down and ended up making a mistake that would change everything. I went back to Vincent's apartment, and in a moment of weakness, I cheated on my husband. We had sex, and for a while, I allowed myself to forget about everything else. We even watched a movie together, and in that moment, it felt like I was single again, with no responsibilities or worries. I was so caught up in the moment that I forgot to send a text to my husband, letting him know I wouldn't be coming home and that I would be staying with a friend. It was a selfish act, driven by the desire for excitement and spontaneity, but one that I would come to deeply regret. The next morning, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. I had done something terribly wrong. I had cheated on my husband. The guilt, disgust, and despair overwhelmed me. I gathered my things and left Vincent's apartment feeling ashamed and broken. As I made my way home, a wave of anxiety washed over me. How could I face my husband after what I had done? When I arrived home, my husband expressed surprise that I hadn't called or texted him the night before, as I had promised. I lied, telling him I had stayed with a friend because I was too drunk to drive. He seemed to buy my story and asked about my night. I lied again, saying it was great and that I had missed him and our friends. The guilt of lying to him weighed heavily on me, but I was too confused and scared to tell him the truth. I felt trapped, unsure whether to confess and risk losing him or keep quiet and hope it would all go away. In the end, I chose to bury the truth, hoping to move on and pretend it never happened. I tried to carry on with life as usual, but the guilt weighed heavily on me, especially when my husband was so loving and kind to me. Returning to work, I noticed my friends acting a bit strange, but I chalked it up to the embarrassing antics of the night before. With everything on my mind, I didn't dwell on it too much. However, as I reflected on my friends' behavior, I began to see red flags. What kind of friends would encourage me to cheat on my husband? I started to question their loyalty and the influence they had on me. The guilt and shame of my actions began to consume me, and I realized that living a lie was very hard. It felt like I was caught between a rock and a hard place. I didn't want to lie to my husband, but I also didn't want to lose him. So I tried to carry on with the guilt, hoping it would eventually fade away. I started being extremely kind to him, trying to overcompensate for my actions. However, it seemed like the more I tried, the more distant he became. No matter how much I tried to be close to him, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was slipping away. I no longer felt that thirst and hunger for spontaneity like I did before. It was as if my life had returned to normal, and the excitement I once craved had dissipated. My friends, who had been so close to me before, now seemed distant, as if they were keeping something from me. Even my husband, who I tried so hard to be close to, was distant. No matter how much I tried to shake things up, to inject some excitement back into my life, he only grew more and more distant. I found myself longing for the days when everything was new and exciting. I missed the thrill of trying something new, of stepping out of my comfort zone. But now, everything felt stale and repetitive. I tried to talk to my friends about it, to recapture some of that old magic, but they didn't seem interested. It was as if they had moved on, leaving me behind. My relationship with my husband suffered the most. We used to be so close, but now there was a distance between us that I couldn't seem to bridge. I tried to be more affectionate, more attentive, but it seemed like nothing I did could bring us back together. He was always busy with work or with his own thoughts, and I felt like I was losing him. I started to question everything. Had I made a mistake? Was I destined to live a life of mediocrity, always longing for something more but never quite reaching it? I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. My life had become a cycle of work, home, sleep, repeat, and I felt trapped in it. I missed my husband. I missed our close bond, but I couldn't figure out what was bothering him. I tried to bury the guilt, to pretend like it never happened, but the truth has a way of coming out. One night, a few weeks ago, my husband surprised me by making a reservation at a restaurant. He said he felt that things had been a little rigid between us lately, and that he thought going out would help us reconnect. I was excited because it had been a while since we had done something like that together. I had work that day, so I told him I would come back from work, and then we could go out for dinner. When I got to work that day, there were some red flags that I should have noticed, but I was too caught up in my routine to pay attention. My friends, who had been distant with me, approached me and started chatting during lunchtime. We talked for a while and they asked me about my husband. I told them he was fine and they seemed surprised. They asked me if we were still together, and I asked them what they meant by that. They said nothing and that they were just genuinely asking. I felt like that was a bit weird, but I didn't think much of it. Work finished up as usual. I clocked off and I went home. We got ready for dinner and then we went out. We got to the restaurant, ordered our food, and it was a little awkward between us at first. But we soon eased into conversation and started talking more freely. We talked about how we had been so busy these past few weeks, and how we had been distant with each other. We talked about a lot of stuff, and then at one point my husband asked me if I had anything to tell him. Looking back now, I realized that was his way of giving me a chance to come clean. But at that moment, I didn't have the courage. I hesitated, then told him no. I didn't have anything to tell him. He seemed okay with that, a little surprised and hurt perhaps, but we continued on with our dinner. We paid the check, left a generous tip, and then started heading home. However, when we got into the car to drive back home, my husband reached into a compartment in the car and brought out some papers. He handed them to me, and when I looked at them, I realized they were divorce papers. My heart sank and I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. I was horrified and my hands started trembling as I stared at the divorce papers in disbelief. Why was this happening? The only explanation that came to mind was the fact that I cheated. But how had he found out? As I looked at my husband, his once cheerful expression was now replaced by a mix of hurt and betrayal. I knew he had discovered my secret. He had found out about my infidelity, and he was crushed. He said he couldn't understand how I could betray him like that, how I could throw away everything we had built together. He explained that he had a video, and my heart sank as he played it on his phone. There, clear as day, was footage of me kissing the stranger from the bar. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. My friends had betrayed me. Those same friends who had seemed so supportive and curious about my night out had recorded my indiscretion and sent it to my husband. I then understood why they approached me during lunch. I couldn't comprehend their betrayal. Why would they do this to me? When had they even recorded me? I wasn't so drunk that night as to not be able to pay attention to my surroundings. So how had my friends been able to record me without me knowing? Had I been that distracted?
No.
My husband then, as I confirmed that they had sent it to him that very night, and he had been giving me a chance to confess. He said he waited and gave me time, but I just clamped up and never admitted it. He said he had decided to end our marriage. I felt numb, the weight of my actions crashing down on me. I had destroyed my marriage, hurt the person I loved most in the world, all for a fleeting moment of excitement. My husband said that he was angry, he was betrayed, but that one thing he was not was cruel. He told me that he would give me 10 minutes to get my things out of his house. He said that he had sent a message to my brother before we went out for dinner to come over and help me get my things, and that he had already sent over the video to my parents and siblings and explained everything. He said that my brother would most likely have already been waiting for us at the house, or would arrive in a matter of minutes by the time we would reach the house. It was as if it was all a joke. It was as if everything was just glossing over me. I didn't even know how to react. I cried and begged, but my husband wouldn't even bother listening to me. He just told me to be quiet and let him drive. When we got to the house, he told me that my 10 minutes started now. My brother hadn't arrived yet, so he said he would send a text to my brother to confirm where he was, and that in the meantime I could arrange my stuff and put them out on the porch. He was quite serious about this, and I knew there would be no talking to him now or trying to convince him to not kick me out. On checking my phone, I realized that my parents and even my siblings had all sent me messages ranging from "what the heck" to "I'm very disappointed in you." They were all horrified and disappointed. My parents told me to not even dare bug my husband and to just pack my stuff and come back to the house, that they would help me talk to my husband. That actually made me feel a little relieved. I packed and arranged my stuff on the porch, and in a matter of minutes, my brother was there. My husband didn't even bother coming out. He just shut the door in my face. I had to go back to my parents' house with my brother. Staying at my parents' house was challenging. They tried their best to be supportive, as did my siblings. Despite their anger at what I had done, they encouraged me to give my husband time to calm down, suggesting he might take me back since I had never cheated on him before. Commuting from my parents' house to work became my new routine because my husband hadn't allowed me to take the car when I left his house. He had bought the car, so I understood his decision. Additionally, he had cleared out our joint account, leaving me with practically nothing. While the money was his, this sudden lack of financial independence hit me hard, highlighting how much I depended on him. Unfortunately, bad news spreads faster than good news, and soon everyone at work knew that my husband had kicked me out of the house. It was during this time that I saw the true nature of my so-called friends. They were heartless, mocking my situation with indirect comments, making an already difficult time even more unbearable. About a week after moving back in with my parents, I decided to resign from my job. Before leaving, however, I reported the situation to the Human Resources Office, HRO. I didn't have high hopes that they could intervene, considering the whole thing happened outside of work hours and the comments my friends made were indirect ones. But I felt compelled to speak up before resigning. To my surprise, my boss was understanding of my situation. Instead of the usual 2-week notice, he allowed me to leave immediately. This gesture of empathy was a small comfort during this challenging time. Now, back at my parents' house without a job, I felt a deep sense of sadness and uncertainty. At times, I even feared sinking into depression. My husband had made sure I didn't forget to take the divorce papers, but I refused to sign them. My parents advised me to hold off, as there was a chance my husband might reconsider. Despite his silence, I held on to hope that we could work things out. Seeking a fresh start, I began searching for remote job opportunities. The idea of working from home appealed to me, as I was honestly tired of socializing after the whole betrayal shit my so-called friends pulled on me. If only I hadn't gone out with them that fateful night, perhaps none of this wouldn't have happened. During this time, my mother-in-law reached out to me. She was really disappointed in what I had done, but well, I was desperate, so I lied to her, saying I was drunk when that happened and wouldn't have cheated if I was sober. She seemed to kind of get it. She said she would help me talk to my husband, which gave me some hope. I thought maybe the pressure from my husband's mom and my parents might make him change his mind. A few weeks later, my parents decided it was time to intervene. My mother-in-law couldn't come, but she said she would message my husband and try to persuade him to forgive me. We went to my husband's house hoping to talk things out. He hadn't been communicating with any of us and had even blocked us, but we were banking on the fact that he was a programmer, and so he majorly worked from home. Thankfully, he was there, and he let us in. He offered us drinks, which seemed like a good sign, but he still didn't want to reconcile. My parents tried to talk to him about forgiveness and how what I did was wrong. He listened, but he made it clear that forgiving me wasn't something he was considering. He said even if he did forgive me, he could never forget what happened, and that it might be better for us to separate. He insisted that the best thing I could do was to sign the divorce papers to make things easier for both of us. He told me that no matter how I felt, cheating was inexcusable, and every action had consequences. I was devastated. I started crying, hoping my tears would move him, but he seemed unmoved. He expressed disappointment that I had involved his mom, saying it made him question his relationship with her. He also pointed out that I wasn't so drunk that I didn't know what I was doing, and he thought it was foolish of me not to notice my friends recording the incident. Before we left, he reiterated that signing the divorce papers would be the best thing for both of us to move on. It was a moment of clarity and like a wake-up call for me, a realization that hit me like a ton of bricks. I had to let William go. I had caused him immense pain, and there was no way to undo the damage I had done. The only path forward was to sign those divorce papers and accept the consequences of my actions. As I was about to leave with my parents, I mustered up the courage to apologize to William. I promised him that I would sign the papers and send them over. His surprise at my sudden change in attitude was palpable, but there was also a sense of relief in his demeanor. He thanked me, and as I walked away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Returning home, I knew I had to come to terms with the reality of the situation. William was not going to take me back, and clinging to false hope would only prolong our pain. I explained to my parents that it was time to let him go, that dragging out the process would only be a waste of everyone's time. William had always been a caring and loving partner, but he could also be incredibly stubborn, especially when it came to matters of principle. I knew that once he had made up his mind, there was no changing it. So I made the decision to sign the divorce papers and deliver them to him myself. Standing on his doorstep, I felt a mix of emotions, regret, sadness, but also a strange sense of acceptance. I handed him the papers, thanked him for everything, and reiterated my apologies. There were no tears, no pleading. I knew it was over and I had to accept it. Now, I wait for the court date, knowing that my chances of a favorable outcome are slim. The video evidence of my infidelity is damning, and my brother, who is a lawyer, has told me that my case is not strong. My brother cannot represent me because conflict of interest and, well, he doesn't really specialize in divorce. But even so, I am grateful that William's terms in the divorce papers are not too harsh. I will not be left with nothing. At this point, all I can do is accept the consequences of my actions and move forward. I have learned a hard lesson, one that will stay with me for the rest of my life. I can only hope that one day, I will be able to forgive myself for the pain I have caused. And so here I am, pouring my heart out to strangers on the internet, hoping that maybe, just maybe, my story can serve as a cautionary tale. Don't take your loved ones for granted. Cherish every moment you have together because you never know when it might be taken away from you. I had done this to myself. My husband divorced me because he found out I had kissed 3 different guys in the club. I had made the worst mistake in my life, and I didn't mean to. I was slightly drunk because my husband and I had a fight, and I went and kissed guys in the club. I didn't know he was going to find out, and I didn't know the revenge he would carry out on me before divorcing me would be drastic. I had made sure to hide my tracks, but he had somehow found out. I hadn't even meant to kiss the guys. I was just angry. I didn't expect everything to lead up to divorce. It was something I didn't plan. It was something I expected my husband to forgive me if he ever found out, irrespective of the fact that one of the guys I had kissed in the club was his friend. Wasn't he supposed to let bygones be bygones? Why did he have to carry out a revenge on me that I haven't still recovered from and divorce me? He knew fully well I didn't have any money apart from his, yet he took it away from me all because I smooched lips with some guys. Was that normal? I mean, all he could have done was warn me never to try it again, and we would have progressed with our marriage. I guessed he never truly loved me if he did that to me. That was the only true explanation. My husband never loved me because we were supposed to stand beside each other through thick and thin. I had suspected from the very beginning that he was just marrying me because of my father's money. Then the unexpected happened and he didn't see any use for me again. That was why he acted like that, because I kissed a few guys. I mean, what was even his problem? I had just kissed them. It's not as if we made out or I slept with any of them. LOL, and so what if I did? Did that give him the right to divorce me and discard me like we hadn't been married for 5 years? My name is Miranda and I'm 30 years old, but I look 21 still. I'm sure you all reading this can already tell I'm a spoiled brat. Yes, I am. My daddy paid my bills up until he died, God rest him. My husband's name is Kieran and he's 30 years old too, I think. I don't keep all that information in my head. I was married to this man for 5D*MN years and he decided to end my life like this. He actually ruined my life. As I was saying, we were married for 5. We dated for 1. I met him when I was bartending at one of the popular beer spots in Atlanta. This was before they fired me 2 weeks after I met my husband because their supply was going missing. No, I wasn't the one that was reducing their supply. I wasn't and am not a chronic drinker. Anyway, my husband walked into the bar one evening and took a good long appreciative look at me, and I knew right there that I was either going to get married to him or we were going to hook up. LOL, we hooked up first and got married after a year of dating. When we were dating, he saw all sides of me. He knew I was a chronic partier and a lazy bum and couldn't cook to save my life, but he still wanted me. Now, I figure out why he wanted me all those years ago. He wanted me for my money. Technically, it was my father's money, but potato, right? My husband had wanted to start a new tech company. My father had the funds. It's so obvious now why he accepted all my excesses and never bothered me about it while we were dating and in our first year of marriage. He had wanted to be in my father's good books. That's sly. Too bad he didn't get what he wanted because reality hit. As I was saying, my husband knew all of my bad habits and tolerated it. He had even sponsored them sometimes. Taking me to parties, getting me the most expensive drinks. Basically, he pampered me just like my daddy had. I know you might be wondering why, if I was rich, why I had been working as a bartender. Well, because I wanted to experience working class life. I had tried college and it didn't go well. I had tried the corporate 9 to 5 and I had absolutely loathed it. So I decided to do something more to my lifestyle. Free drinks and hot men looking to hook up after my shift. That was the life. My father never questioned me. And by the time my husband and I had come around to dating, I had been fired from my job, LOL. Dating my husband was great because he never took me for granted. It is now clear to me why. He showered me with love and affection and respect. He didn't shout at me or question me or beat me. He absolutely adored me. So I saw no harm in doing forever with him when he proposed. I had done almost everything except marry and have kids. I wanted to try that, and if I didn't like it, my daddy would just snap his fingers and everything would go away, or so I thought. I was totally foolish. My husband and I got married in a grand wedding. There had been local celebrities present, and all my friends and exes were there gossiping about how lush my wedding was. Just how I liked it. My husband was handsome, of course. Not so much now that he became the villain in my reality. And everyone was jealous of what I had. My daddy had gone all out to give me the best. In case you're wondering, I am an only child and my mom died when she gave birth to me. I'm trying to emphasize just how much I meant to my dad. Our honeymoon was at Santorini, and after that my daddy flew us to Milan and then to the Maldives. It was marvelous, the whole experience and everything, but I didn't know my whole life was about to change. My daddy gave my husband the funds he needed to use and start his company, and my husband babied me. I didn't know it was because I was a means to an end, but I found out when my father died. Yes, my father died immediately. We came back from our honeymoon and the bank swooped in immediately. He had borrowed according to them and he needed to pay back his loan with his assets even though he was dead. This was how they swept up and took all my funds. The funds that were supposed to be mine, they had seized it all up and carted it away. This was how I became at my husband's mercy. It didn't even take up to 2 years, and my husband's attitude towards me changed. Apparently, his business that my father had invested in began to do well, and he didn't need to suck up to anybody so he could finally treat me how he wanted to. Everything began from our 2nd year of marriage. I had to learn how to cook because that was the only way he would give me money. Do you know this man went so far as making me iron his work clothes? LOL, after burning about 3 of his expensive shirts, no one told him to hide his clothes from me. But in all these things I had endured. I had stayed at his side and didn't run away even though I wanted to so many times. I stopped most of my habits because I didn't want to lose my husband, seeing as he was my only source of income. I did everything he asked. I went to occasions with him and smiled at his side even though what I wanted to do was dance and forget my sorrows in the music. I obviously couldn't do that. My husband and I endured our excesses until I couldn't take it again after 5 years. He decided one day to bring his mother into our house. Can you imagine being policed by both a man and his mother? It was a terrible experience for me. Everything I did was a mistake. My husband's mother complained during dinner and how terrible my food was and it was only fit for dogs. That I was the reason her son was skinny and didn't look like he had life in him ever since he had married me. I didn't take it as anything because people said mean things all the time and my husband wasn't skinny. She was just trash talking. But the trash talk continued. She told me every time that I wasn't getting this right and this shouldn't go this way, and I needed to sit up if I was to have children in this life. One of the things I heard so often was how she didn't even understand why and how her Don had married me. This was someone that had invited all her friends to her son and I's wedding to brag about the quality of the wedding. Old witch. What had pushed me to the breaking point of going back to my old habits? My husband and his stupid wants. The cause of our quarrels this time was how I had to get a job, and how he couldn't be buying me the things I needed again because he wanted to begin saving for our future children. He hadn't even discussed this with me. He had just brought it up at dinner and his answer was final. Can you believe his audacity? Children? Who had said I wanted children? How had he gotten to that delusional conclusion? Men never understood, did they? Well, we got into a heated argument that night and I stormed out of the house. Guess where I had gone to clear my head? No, not the club. I'd gone to get a drink and clear my head because I couldn't be in that suffocating house with my husband's mother glaring at me like I didn't have complete eyes, and I was an abomination, and with my husband talking to me like I was a child. I was totally sick of it, terribly sick of it. I couldn't call out my friends because they also had their own homes and kids to take care of and prepare for school the next day. So I went drinking by myself, and it was a big mistake that I went alone because I ran into my ex at the bar. Such a little world. My ex was unmarried and more handsome than I had ever seen him. But nothing happened between us that night. I was sure of that. Just that I spilled my guts to him about everything that happened in my marriage, and he took me to a club to go and dance away my problems. And it was an out-of-this-world experience. It felt good being back in my own body, my world where I could just dance and not let anything bother me. Anyway, my ex took me back home at 2 in the morning when the whole house was dark. But I had a feeling my husband's mother was watching me as I creeped back into the house. I sat on nails the next morning, but my husband didn't say anything. His mother hadn't ratted it out to my husband, which was unusual. There was something totally wrong with that, but I had tried not to provoke her because I didn't want her to rat me out. I didn't know she was planning something else. She didn't even play out the pretense for long. All it took was me not doing what she wanted, and my husband's mother ran straight to my husband. That evening, my husband descended on me during dinner and how I was frolicking with other men while I was married to him. You all needed to see my husband that day, like he was ready to beat my life out of my body. But he didn't touch me. I tried explaining, but he didn't believe me. He chose his mother's words over mine. I had told him that I had only gone to see one of my friends. I even added that he could call her. And we had a lot to drink, and I had stumbled into my ex in our street. I didn't know how I had come up with that lie so fast, but it was a waste. My husband didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, and his mother taunted me each time that a no-good waste of space and her son would be better off if he divorced me immediately and found someone homely to marry who would give him the children he wanted. I couldn't let that happen while I was alive, so I had done the only thing that I had thought would make my husband forgive me. I had applied for a job at his company. He didn't know I had done that, and the people at the office knew he was married but didn't know he was married to me. So I had gotten another 9 to 5 with his money. When my husband found out, he was okay with it and happy that I had started working and providing for the family. That in the next 2 years, with our accumulated savings, we could start our family. This was someone who owned the company and paid my salary saying that. But I had decided not to argue. I was happy that my husband was happy and my marriage wasn't on shaky grounds. However, I couldn't cope. I couldn't cope one bit. I needed money for my needs because my husband was still not providing for them. He was even expecting me to be saving up for imaginary kids, LOL. The salary of junior staff in the office was small, and I believe my husband kept the salary low on purpose. Immediately the monthly salary came, it would go to my skincare, makeup, accessories, and the like, and it was all finished up, like I hadn't even been paid for that month. After a while, I couldn't take it anymore, and I met up with my ex. My ex introduced me to a way to save up money and have it doubled. I had never known those types of things existed in this world until I had been informed about it. To start, I scraped up my savings of about $2,000 and gave it to my ex to invest in his thing for me. He returned with $10,000. I was shocked and tried it again. This time I put in the whole $10,000. I mean, it was working, so let me just put in everything, and when I've had enough, I'll stop. That had been the plan. I didn't know how foolish this deal with the devil was going to end up. My ex remitted $15,000 after I invested with him, and I became greedy. I stole my husband's money to invest. He usually kept some in a safe for our children, and I happened to see when he unlocked it one particular day. I took about $15,000 and added it to my $15,000. In my head, that would have given me about $60,000. I would have been rich, enough to last me about a year plus, and I could quit the job in my husband's company. But then my ex had to disappoint me. Should I have been disappointed? I should have seen it coming, shouldn't I? I'd been so blinded by my greed because I thought I could make more. I deceived myself and started the cycle of hot mess I landed myself in. A week after giving my ex the money, I didn't see from him or hear from him. I tried calling, and I was in trouble. I made a big mistake at work. I messed up the numbers, which resulted in a client being angry, which resulted in my husband shouting at me in front of everyone at work, and then it was revealed I was his wife and a good-for-nothing who couldn't even do my job. Then I made another big mistake. With all the stress, I had thought my ex would be at the club he had taken me to a while ago. I really should never be in charge of making decisions because I sucked at them. I went to the club to go and find my ex, and I saw drinks and I decided to indulge. I mean, I was going through a lot. My husband treated me like I was a fool. If he found out I had lost this money, he would kill me. I didn't want to end up dead or worse, divorced. So I had gone to the club and I might have drank more than 2 mojitos because before I could blink, I was on the dance floor moving my body because liquor controlled me more than my brain, and I forgot about looking for my ex who had stolen my money. I saw my husband's single friend, and he was looking at me like I was eye candy, and I decided to experiment on the thoughts in my head. I drank my 4th mojito, and before I knew it, I was exchanging saliva with the 3rd guy at the club. I didn't know how I had even made it home. I just remembered that I had found myself at the front door of my home the following morning at around 4, and I remembered my husband had gone on a business trip. So I thanked whatever was up above for that blessing. Luckily, his mother also wasn't living with us at that time. She had gone back home, and it was just me and my husband, so there was no one who saw me coming back from a club at around 4 in the morning. I let myself in, and all the memories of what I had done floated back into my head. I played it cool for the next couple of weeks. My husband hadn't found out about the club incident, and he hadn't also found out about the missing money. I didn't know how I was going to get back $15,000 to put back in the safe, so I began pawning off my jewelry. All the fine things I had gotten with my daddy's money. I needed to at least replace half of what was missing. Then I would clean about the remaining half. But the money was just too much, and no matter how many things I pawned, it barely reached 1/3 of the money. With my salary that came in at the end of that terror-filled month, I was able to make the money up to 1/3. This was after I had already pawned off all my things. I was broke and still had a huge debt to repay. Then everything became worse. My husband found out about the fact that I had kissed 3 different guys. I had no idea how he found out. One moment I was at home trying to prepare dinner, and he stormed into the house with a picture of me kissing his friend on his phone. I couldn't say anything as I was speechless. What would you have expected me to say? Well, I tried reasoning with him and told him how it was because I had too much to drink. That was why I had kissed his friend. I made the mistake of saying it was only his friend that I kissed, and my husband hated lies. He tore into me the next moment and produced pictures of me kissing 2 other guys. I cried and begged, but he threw me out of the house that evening and told me he was going to get back at me for disgracing me amongst his friends. That night I had slept on the curb, and the next morning my husband threw all my belongings outside and burned them right in front of me. Could you imagine that? How could he be so cruel? I begged, but he didn't answer me. When he was done, he told me if I wasn't at the office to sort out the mess I had created with the client's work, the police would come knocking, and he didn't want to see me in his house by evening. You all, this was how I went to work with yesterday's clothes because my husband had burnt all my things when he knew full well I prized appearance above all else. I went straight to his office when I had managed to gather my pride and enter work, and went straight to his office. This man handed me divorce papers then and there and told me I had to go and meet the client and sort out the mess of the company, and he asked me to get out of his office. I had never been so embarrassed in my life. The snickers from the office people as I left was enough to haunt me to my deathbed, and I wasn't even kidding. I went to the location my husband had given me, and as I entered the building, a group of people rushed me and moved me into an alleyway and gave me the beating of my life. They all had women billed and told me to sign those divorce papers and not to mess with my husband again. He had hired female goons to rough me up, and they had roughed me up so badly that I ended up in the hospital. That was when my husband came to the hospital and watched me sign the papers with my broken hands. A week later, I got out of the hospital on debit, and I asked all my friends for a place to stay, but they had all abandoned me. Apparently, my husband had told them I was cheating on him and had run away with his money. I hadn't even stepped out of the hospital when my husband and a man approached me. He had found out about the missing money, and I either paid him right then and there or get arrested by the police officer for stealing. I didn't have any money to pay him, so I was whisked away to the police station. I had no friends, no money, and no husband. I begged my ex-husband to let me out of there. I could get the money for him, but he wasn't having it. I had stolen from him and cheated on him and brought him nothing but bad luck. I explained I had wanted to double the money, but once again my plea fell on deaf ears. I stayed in the cell for a month. I was about to go mad from why my life was like this and how I had no money. I almost got admitted to the hospital again because I kept on getting texts on how I was supposed to pay my hospital bills and texts from my ex-husband's thugs on how I needed to pay the money I owed. If not, they were going to beat me up again and make sure I'm crippled this time. How was I supposed to pay the money from inside a prison cell? I had no one to bail me out. They were talking about transferring me to a real prison yard when luckily they got through to my long-distance aunt, and she bailed me out and took me with her to her place in England. That was how I escaped my ex-husband's death threat and learnt my lesson.